This presentation really is about my failures and the learnings that I've had along the way. And really the objective is that you might pick up on some advice or some tips that you can take that back to the organization that you work with. Who works for a large organization in this room? Put your hands up. Okay. About half. And who works for a large organization that's also in an agile journey? Same people. So really, half of you are working for organizations that are trying to be like large organizations that are trying to be like small organizations, right? That are trying to be agile and lean. My name is Vin Marin, and currently I'm engaged at a large telco company that's on the same journey. And the focus of this talk will be a little bit more specific, not about transformation, but on a journey throughout a project. Because we still don't have long-lived teams at the place where I work. It's still project-based. And we all know that it's not easy to take stakeholders that are on an agile journey and expect that we can achieve great results. But really the secret is about giving them first-class treatment. Now, what that means is that we want to take them on a journey where they can be part of our teams, they can participate, but also become our advocates in the industry. So the first class treatment really is about giving them visibility, bringing them into the planning, decision making, and continuously engaging the stakeholders so that you can achieve maximum results for them. So the underlying reason of why we do that is to really maximize results for them. And there's really a number of different agile mechanisms that we can leverage to actually help us do that. So who are the key stakeholders, or who are the most valuable stakeholders you might have in a project? Any comments? Would anyone dare to say who are the most valuable stakeholders you can have?
People paying the bills.
People paying the bills, so project sponsors? Customers? Or maybe product owners that represent the customers, really? So within the project context, I'm just going to try and sort of just narrow down the idea that you have business stakeholders and also management stakeholders. And obviously the business stakeholders are more interested in the outcomes, and the management stakeholders are more interested in the how do we get to those outcomes. It's important to know that these stakeholders, so the business and the project, have the ability to enhance the project, but also slow it down. Now they can enhance it by removing obstacles for you, sort of clearing the path for the delivery. On the other hand, though, the business stakeholders could be slowing you down by changing requirements or poorly articulating them and sort of popping up as blockers. So in some way you need to balance between these two stakeholder sets, right? Especially if you're working within constraints, then you need to be very active and proactive, to balance those two drivers. I think it's also important to know that the more influential stakeholders, so as they go up the ladder in the organizations, especially if they have a vested interest, they also have the ability to remove impediments. And a perfect example of that I've had in the past was if there's a very critical project that delivery is being made, and if it's driven by very tight deadlines, or for example, a government regulator that needs to set a particular outcome to happen at a particular date, it's very important to sort of involve the people that are up the chain that you're working with. So the example that I've had in the past where a particular business unit director was involved in a project where I was trying to deliver some outcomes to a very tight deadline, and he would come forward and I say, is there anything that I can help you with? Is there any blockers that you're having that you can't deal with yourself? And once you sort of get them on your side, they also they're much more influential within the organization to make things happen, rather than you trying to sort of break through that sort of layer where there's a lot of process and red tape and limitations of what you can do. So get to know the key stakeholders. It's important to know what they want, right? What is important to them? What is driving them? How did they quantify success for the delivery that you're making. But also know that due to many various stakeholders being on the project and various interests, you may not be able to satisfy all of them. Especially when you're working with constraints, again, it's a balancing act. And in that case, you just may need to really prioritize and concentrate on who is the most important stakeholder that you can be working with to deliver outcomes for them. Everybody knows this guy from Office Space, Lumberg, and obviously he's a very difficult stakeholder to manage. But unfortunately, there's a lot of these in the environments that we work in. And I've had the privilege of working with a similar person on a project, and I had to sort of adjust my style really when dealing with this particular stakeholder, because their expectations were that, for example, I would be keeping them updated on a daily basis, even on the weekends. So that's why it resonates with Lumberg, saying, you know, might need you to work on Saturday. So what's your role on the journey? Probably not something like Richard Branson being wearing a funny outfit like that. But it really is to be a steward and to make things simple and easy for the stakeholders. You need to engage continuously and educate and coach them in different agile mechanisms so that you can really achieve outcomes. Now, you'll consistently be faced with the problem or the question of, you know, the requirements that I've given you, can you deliver those on this particular date within the budget that I have given you? So I think it's very important at that stage that you sort of pull your toolbox out and just take them on a journey and say, you know, what are the most important requirements? How do you envisage going to the market or launching this particular solution? What do you envisage as being really the success criteria? Which are the most important parts of what you're trying to achieve? And it's also important to know that you and your teams are not just programmers and developers. You're really problem solvers. Most business problems can almost be solved by using a pen and paper, for example. If you think about call centers, the worst case scenarios, if the whole system is down, they can at least always capture the customer name, phone number on a piece of paper and call them back when the system is up, right? You don't need to have a full fancy Siebel that's worth over $1 billion to actually fulfill that need. So if you're in the position to solve business problems without looking at it from the software point of view, if you're concentrating what is the business need and what do we need to actually solve, then you're also adding value to your stakeholders. A perfect example is John, who's a tech lead in my team. I work in the reporting and the business intelligence side of Telstra. But John, because he's very capable and very smart and very experienced in different systems, he gets phone calls from a program manager that we work with, who's actually in charge of a very large $5–10 million program, just to get advice on what design principles they need to put in when designing another system, purely because he trusts John's advice and he gets more than just software out of our team. He gets a lot more value. And that really breeds trust. And the other win from these sort of situations, that when our delivery is suffering, this same stakeholder, the program manager, comes to our aid as well. So there's sort of a reciprocal relationship that you develop with them. A lot of stakeholders are just dropped into technical projects from the business where they normally have a day job as well. And then they're expected to hit the ground running and to fulfill a product owner role. Now that's a perfect opportunity to coach and to educate them about what the responsibilities are. What are the expectations from the team? But at the same time, I think it's also important that you make them aware of their rights. Has anyone done this before? Has anyone shared rights with their business stakeholders or anything along those lines? A few hands go up.
Social contract with
the stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
Yeah. So this is really a two-way street, right? You're expecting them to help you, and you're also setting the expectation that they have rights, so they can expect things from your team. This is just an example, but I think it's worth your note to develop your own, especially when you're engaging with some stakeholders in a new piece of work. So obviously the responsibilities are for them to be committed, for them to give their time to the project that they're involved with, to be engaged, not to sort of try to run away and just try to delegate to someone else, to be flexible. Negotiation, especially when you're working with constraints, is very important. But also to provide regular feedback and clearly articulate requirements. And at the same time, the rights that they have the right to is to have a committed team, to have transparency, to be taught technical things, to be coached, but to also have value delivered to them. So once you have clarified the roles with your stakeholders, and everybody's clear what the role is within the project and what you're trying to do, get involved in their business and try to understand the problem domain of what they're working within. Ask them to be across the business case, if there is one, really. In a lot of cases, they don't really have a business case, or it's an initiative that's getting off the ground quickly, and so on. But if they don't have a clear vision or a business case that they're driving towards, then how will you be able to know when you get there? And I think the other important aspect is that as you get involved in these projects, that you sort of immerse yourself into the business and try to understand more about the problems that they're facing. But not only that, but to understand the wider picture. There's a lot of external factors driving these projects. And the more you know about it, again, the more value you can add. Because they're most likely to be providing a set of requirements, and you're saying, right, go and build that. That's the solution. In other words, they're telling you what the solution is, even before clarifying what the problem is. I think it's also important that you agree how you will work together. A lot of stakeholders think that building software is like ordering a pizza. You dial a number and you submit your order, you say what you want, and then expect it to be there within 15 minutes. But the reality is not like that. It's more like along the lines of, let's make pizza together, come over to my house, we'll see what's in the fridge, and we'll make pizza within the constraints of what's in the fridge. So making the pizza is really a part of the journey, and you're creating a recipe, you're not following a recipe. Sorry to be saying this just before lunch, but it's almost. So it's really important for them to understand, and this is your steward duty, is to articulate how difficult and complex software development is, especially if you're working within large, old legacy systems. You're trying to really minimize the room for error, and you're trying to minimize the misaligned expectations. So really the approach of, I'll give you some requirements, churn out some code, doesn't really work. So what can you do? You can always show them this picture. I really say, look, we're going to concentrate on de-risking this delivery. And this is how we're going to do it. You'll help them identify what they think they want, try to articulate it as stories, and then you go away and build something. And that's, again, your perception of what you think they want. And you show it to them, you get feedback, and then you do another iteration over the product that you've just built. And I think the perfect mechanism that Agile sort of allows us to do is to have iteration reviews. So the iteration review is really a very powerful mechanism, is that you show them some work and you get feedback, right? So you're sort of pivoting early if it's really necessary. Now, for example, within Telstra or other large organizations, it's very difficult to do that, especially when you're working with old systems. But the alternative solution to that is to also have a proof of concept or a wireframe or anything that's more tangible than just talking about it, to show them, get feedback and say, this is what you're going to get. Is this going to solve the business need you have? No? Well, what would you like to change? On the topic of de-risking, go a little bit slower. Again, if you're working with requirements, or in better cases, stories, they're really just the articulation of a desire. The actual outcome is a product of collaboration and negotiation, of what is wanted and what can be done, again, working within constraints. And it's important to articulate those constraints whenever you're talking solutions so that everybody's aware of what you're working with. And again, going back to the balance of the project management who's looking at the delivery and the business who's expecting a lot. So one way to really do that is to construct a problem statement. Rather than talk about requirements, try to articulate scenarios that the business user is trying to solve. And always remember that the goal is to solve a business problem or a need rather than satisfy requirements. Again, coming back to the value that you can add to the delivery rather than just being a coding monkey and delivering what they're asking for. Because they might come back and say, well, actually, I've changed my mind. So another part of de-risking is that you're really de-risking the expectations of the customer. You're expecting them to change their mind. So if you show them something early, you get feedback early as well, and you pivot. Now this is a novel idea. All the teams scrum, but how many people scrum with the stakeholders? Does anyone here have a regular cadent meeting with the project or program management and product owners? 3, 4, very small amount. I think anything that fulfills the purpose of reducing misaligned expectations, right? Showcase is usually treated as, we've done all this work, ta-da, here it is. But how did you get there? You must have faced some obstacles, you must have faced issues, things that slow you down. And I think it's also important that you facilitate the interaction, make a positive experience for them. A lot of these business stakeholders, because remember they have daytime jobs as well, they sort of drift away, and then you got to keep reeling them in and pulling them back in to say, hey, remember you've got responsibilities, you know. Can you come more regularly? And you're really trying to make them part of your team rather than as an external party that you're just trying to satisfy. And one of the best ways is to share the obstacles and the issues that you're facing, pull them in, say, hey, we need your help with this, especially if they're more senior stakeholders and especially if they have more influence. They're more likely not only to be able to help you, they're probably wanting to help you as well. They actually want you to succeed. So the sort of projects keep going and the delivery, you get into sort of a tempo delivery. You sort of start thinking, well, you know, we understand what we're building and I think we have relatively clear requirements. We think that we're going to hit the particular date or the particular scope that we are going to be delivering. And slowly, again, the stakeholders sort of start just slowly drifting away. And that's also, especially as you're getting towards the end of the delivery, it's very important to keep them engaged. Keep them informed of the progress. Share the obstacles that you're facing. Again, ask for the help. Keep reeling them back in. And I think it's also very important that you establish meetings on a cadence where you say every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, we're going to meet, no matter what. In addition to the iteration reviews, you don't really need to be able to show working software, but at least it gives you an opportunity, it gives you an audience to share the progress, the obstacles, and other issues that you're facing. And also, it serves as a meeting to reset the expectations. Has anyone ever gone to a Burger King or McDonald's and you sort of see the ad and the burger looks great and you just can't wait to get your hands on it, and then you get it and you open the packaging and you're disappointed? Try to prevent that with your projects. So manage expectations continuously. Make sure that the stakeholders are perfectly aware of what they'll be getting. There shouldn't be any surprises. And the other very important aspect is that make sure that the stakeholders understand the impacts of changing scope at any one point in time. So you need to be able to articulate in their terms, really in simple language, there may be an impact to the delivery or time or scope. So if they're asking questions, can we increase the scope of feature 3, and say, sure, yeah, but it's going to push out feature 5. Are you okay with that? It's a continuous negotiation. And that's sort of bringing me towards the last couple of slides. And there shouldn't be really any sort of news in regards to what transparency is. But it's highly important. And I think this is the part that really builds trust. Being open, transparent, talk about the work in progress, share your definition of done, talk about the quality that you are producing, talk about the bugs, talk about the defects that have been discovered. Again, resetting the expectations and making sure that they're across the progress and the stage where you're at. And I think it's also vitally important to visually show everything that's in progress. And again, if any new work comes in, it gives you a very visual way of showing the impacts of that new work, right? For example, the scaled agile environment where I'm working at, there's a big pipeline of work. There's multiple teams working on many projects, and it is of vital importance that we can show the work in progress across all teams. So not only that we have a good flow, but that we can restrict work in progress as well. We can also see the priorities. We can see which teams are overburdened, which teams are actually moving at a faster rate, which teams are moving at a slower rate. So I think it's very important to show that not only to within the project environment, but to the stakeholders as well, to see, right, this is the rate that we're going at. These are the stories that are blocked for these reasons. Can you help us out? So, key takeaways. Get to know your stakeholders, know the level of influence that they have, and identify the most valuable ones, the ones that can remove blockers for you, the ones that can actually remove the red tape, especially in the processes that you're working with. Coach them, educate them about the Agile process. So leverage what you know from the Agile mechanisms to help you manage them better. Read them their rights. Make them aware of the rights that they have from the team that they're interacting with, obviously your team, but also make them aware of the responsibilities that you're expecting them to fulfill. And if you do that up front, it is very likely that they'll be continuously engaged and they'll be really part of your team. De-risk with feedback loops. If you take away anything today, I think that's the key thing, because it's really the most powerful mechanism that we have in iterative and incremental development, is to get that feedback on what we're building continuously so that we know exactly where we're going, which also allows you to manage expectations much better, which then reduces the surprises at the end of the project as well. So at any one point in time, the stakeholders know exactly what they're getting and when approximately they'll be getting it. And also, last point here is focus on goals. So instead of talking about requirements, talk about the problem that the business is facing, and also obviously the different solutions that you could provide to that problem. So rather than just saying, we're going to deliver these requirements, say we're going to solve this problem for you. And lastly, always bring a smile to the table. So receive your stakeholders with open hands. the team that I've been working with, the last week we had a retro where we had a showcase to some business stakeholders, and they said, well, we really didn't host them very well. We didn't give them any water. We didn't even introduce them to ourselves. They said next time we're going to bring drinks and cookies and just make it a more relaxed environment. And I think that goes a long way. And thank you very much.